Hey, my name's Luke. In today's video, we're going to break down how you can achieve $100,000 worth of passive income through property investing. Now, I don't know about you, but I don't want to wait to the age of 65 to have more choices in my life and to do the things I love. So working towards $100,000 passive income will allow me to have a nice holiday each year, pay for my mortgage, pay for my food, pay for my gym and sport, and have a little bit of money left over. Now in today's video, we're going to break down our specific strategy of how to achieve the $100,000 passive income, but there's lots of strategies out there: blue chip, cash flow, developments. We're not going to be exploring all those options in today's video. We're just going to be exploring the basics of how an average Australian can potentially achieve $100,000 passive income through property investing. Now, this video is not going to be a get-rich-quick scheme, so there's no way that I think you can do this within a short time frame, like 1 to 5 years, unless you have massive amounts of cash coming in and you use high-risk approaches like developments, short-term accommodation, and a mix of options to grow your portfolio quickly. But this is going to be looking at a longer time frame, like 10 to 15 years, to build your portfolio and potentially give you more choices down the track. So keep that in mind, and let's jump into exactly how this is going to work. To start off with, we're going to look at your equity position that you need to control, so the amount of assets that you need to control in order to earn $100,000 of income passively each year. So the first thing we're going to do is look at the total amount of equity required. And the way we calculate that number is we start with the passive income goal of $100,000 and we divide it by 4%. So I'm just going to pull up my calculator here. So $100,000 divided by 4% is $2.5 million. So what that means is you need to control or own $2.5 million worth of assets. You could have 3 properties, you could have 10 properties, but at the end of the day, you need $2.5 million worth of assets, of real estate, to give you $100,000 passive income based on a 4% yield. Now, some areas have lower yields like Sydney and Melbourne. They might be seeing 2 to 3% yields. Other locations might be seeing 5 to 8% yields depending on the opportunity. So now we've worked out our asset goal. So this is our assets. Now we need to look at the number of properties to help us achieve that level of assets. So what we're going to do is we start with phase 1, and this is going to be your foundational portfolio. Now what we do with our foundational portfolio is we're looking for more capital growth opportunities. The hardest thing for people to get is access to more capital to grow their portfolio. So to kick off the portfolio, we're looking for properties that have potentially value-add opportunities and capital growth potential. Let me draw house number 1. So house number 1 is going to be, say, a $500,000 purchase with $400 per week of rent. Once you've had house number 1, what you're looking for is capital growth in the short term to allow you to pull equity and refinance and purchase property number 2. So once you've purchased house number 1, you can either do a renovation or you can wait for the market to appreciate, and then you can purchase property number 2, which again is a similar property which has value add potential in a capital growth location, and you might say purchase that again for $500,000 at $400 per week. So now you've got your 1 to 3 properties. In this example, we're using 2, and you've got $1 million worth of assets with potentially $800,000 worth of debt if you're using an 80% LVR, loan to value ratio. So now you've got your foundations in place. Now it's time to look to leverage that equity and move to cash flow properties to potentially start paying down the debt and to give you a higher passive income in retirement. So phase 2 is cash flow. So there's lots of options here when it comes to your cash flow opportunities. You can go for, short-term accommodations, you can look for lower purchase price properties, or you can look to manufacture value and potentially get a higher rental yield. In this example, we're going to look to, say, purchase 3 lower price properties with a higher rental yield. So we're going to purchase the next house for $350,000, and the rental yield on that is going to be, say, $350 per week. Now, what you need to do here is accumulate enough assets to potentially pay down your property portfolio. So we worked out at the beginning that we need to hold $2.5 million worth of assets at 4% gross yield to potentially give us $100,000 of passive income down the track. So now you're going to continue to accumulate these properties over time, and they might have a similar rental yield. So around that 5.2% mark. They might be higher, they might be lower, but that's just the example that we're using here. So over a space of, say, 5 to 7 years, you might have accumulated 5 properties if you've purchased every 1 to 2 years. So now you've accumulated your foundational portfolio and you've moved to cash flow assets. What this really means is you're not chewing into your lifestyle. The properties should be paying for themselves and you've accumulated just over $2 million worth of assets. Now it's time to let compounding growth take its effect and then work out how you can move to the debt reduction phase. So essentially what we're going to say here is that we're going to see a 5% growth rate in your property values year on year. Now, to give you an idea, Brisbane, Sydney and Melbourne have had historical averages around the 8 to 9% mark. This is trying to be conservative in the numbers to give you an idea of how this might play out in practice. So using 5% compounding growth over a 5-year period of time, your portfolio will grow from 2.05 million using a 5% compounded growth to $2.6 million. Now, essentially what this means is you're using leverage and seeing compounding growth to grow the value in your portfolio. Using other people's money by getting leverage and bank debt and your own cash to grow your portfolio using the combined value of those properties and realizing their growth over time. So say you buy a property for those $500,000, like your original property you purchased in year 1. Now that property might be worth $800,000, but your original money in the deal might have only been $100,000. So every dollar that you earn in terms of value and growth is leveraged based on the bank's debt that allow you to purchase that property in the first place. So now we know that you need to set a foundational portfolio, realize the growth, move to cash flow properties so you don't hurt your lifestyle and you reach a large enough asset base. Now, this is using economies of scale to your advantage. And what this means is you're growing a portfolio large enough so that you can receive this $100,000 worth of passive income in the future. So let me just run through the scenario from the top. Say you purchased your foundational property in year 1, your next property in year 3, and purchase one property each year after that. Now, this is obviously very linear and it's not taking into account taxes and different phases of growth for each of the assets. So it might take you 5 to 7 years to grow the portfolio, use compound growth for 5 years, so you're sitting between the 10 to 15 year mark. Now, the rents will have increased in line with the growth in the properties. It's very unlikely that your rental yields are likely to stay well below the growth that the properties have had. So what we need to do next is move to debt reduction strategies or continue to grow the property portfolio into the future so you can create a larger gap between your debt and the value of your assets. So this moves to phase number 3, and this is consolidation. So we've started with our foundational portfolio, we've moved to cash flow properties, we've created an asset base that's large enough to give us that $100,000 of passive income. So phase number 3 is consolidation, and this is where it moves to debt reduction strategies. You can use your cash to pay down the portfolio. You can do chunk deals. So that means you're potentially subdividing blocks, purchasing property and holding it for the short term to try and realize some growth. You can do renovations. You can actually purchase more property that is high cash flow. So there's lots of options when you move to the consolidation phase. Essentially what we work out here is that you've reached the target in terms of assets you've held, and now you can either reduce the debt to simplify your life or continue to grow the property portfolio to give you more money down the track. Say $100,000 isn't enough and you want to grow your property portfolio to $5 million or $10 million and create a larger net worth and potentially larger passive income down the track. That's where it's completely up to you in phase 3. Now, the reason we don't do this the other way around and advocate for cash flow properties first is because people struggle to save a deposit. Lots of people, I definitely found it difficult with Em when we were trying to get our first deposit together. We saved as much money as we could, and once we got over the hurdle of our first deposit and we saw some growth in the property market, it was a lot easier for us to refinance our property portfolio and make subsequent purchases. So now I've given you that entire breakdown of foundational, cash flow, and consolidation. Let me just talk you through the refinancing process to round out this video and show you how you can pull money out of one deal, take it to the next deal, and grow the portfolio. Because it's all well and good for me to say, hey, go out there and buy 5 properties, but the truth is most Australians don't get that far. The everyday Australian might own 1 or 2 investment properties. It's actually very difficult for people to get that 3, 4, and 5. So let's look at that in detail in this section, and I'll give you my thoughts on exactly how we go about doing that. Now, you really need 3 to 5 properties here. So, you've got a couple in the foundational and a couple in the cash flow. So the reason we go for capital growth first is because you're going to realize that growth, as I said earlier, pull out the money and refinance it. Now, the way this works is, and the way we've sped up our journey, is to do some renovations on the properties to manufacture the value in the short term. So let's look at the manufactured strategy. Now, this is where we take an ugly duckling, so a property that's run down, tired, needs some repairs and maintenance, and needs some work to the kitchen, bathroom, and the living spaces. So what we do is we potentially, we analyze the deal, look at how much a renovation is going to cost us and what the likely return will be relative to comparables in the area. So say we bought our property number 1 in our foundational portfolio and we purchased it for that $500,000, but instead of purchasing further out, we look for a more capital growth location closer to the CBD and look for a more rundown property with value add opportunity. So we buy a 3-bed, 1-bath home, which is in need of some TLC. And we say that we need to spend $35,000 to renovate the property. And once we've done the renovation, the house will be worth $600,000. So, we're all in the property for $535,000. And that means that we can refinance at the $600,000 mark when the bank does a valuation. So what I like to do is wait a year between each property portfolio. I know lots of gurus and guys that share information online have built portfolios faster than that, but this example is trying to explain it for potentially the everyday Australian. So you might do the renovation in year 1 and 12 months later, you come back, the property's been tenanted for a good period of time and it's worth that $600,000. You go back to the bank and say you had debt of $400K on the property, and you go to the bank and say, I want a new loan, I want to refinance and use $600,000 as my valuation. So they send the valuer out there, they agree to that price point, and they give you a new loan at 80%. That means you can pull out $80,000, so you get a new loan of $480K, and that gives you $80 worth of cash to use for a new deposit on another home. Now, you might have saved up plus 20K cash as well over the 12 months, and that's how you purchase number 2. And you can use that same strategy again and again to grow your portfolio. Now, for those that are less inclined to want to take on renovations and want to wait for the market to appreciate, they're going to just use a straightforward capital growth strategy. Now, this is obviously going to take a little bit longer, but this is where you buy the $500K property and you wait, say, 3 years for the property to appreciate in value to the $600K mark. And at that point, you pull out the equity, refinance, go to your broker and your bank and say, I want more money, can you assess my property's value? And pull out more debt to grow your property portfolio. They do the same thing, they give you $80K cash and you use that money to go and purchase another property. So essentially this covers the growth of a property portfolio from the foundations to moving to cash flow, which doesn't affect your lifestyle, and then looking to realize a consolidation phase by paying down the debt, or continuing to grow your property portfolio to a point where you're happy with how much property you've amassed and the numbers stack up for you in terms of if you want a larger passive income over the $100,000 mark. Now, it's good to set achievable goals. So you might not want to set $100,000 as your target. Maybe $50,000 will be enough. And maybe $150,000 is what you're looking for. So as a rule of thumb, you can use the 4% rule and divide the number of passive income that you're looking for, like we said at the start, to work backwards to the total number of assets that you need to hold. This is exactly what Emily and I are doing in our current portfolio. We've bought our foundational portfolio and we're looking to grow our portfolio into cash flow plays now to allow us to reduce the debt, not affect our lifestyle, and go to a point where we have more choices what we do with our time and potentially, do more things that we love. I really enjoy working as a buyer's agent at Purpose Property and helping other people see their property portfolio come to life. So if you're interested in working with me, check the link in the description down below. And if you want to see what we're doing in our personal portfolio, check this video out over here. I'll see you in the next one. Peace.